All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and every other fabulous person in between. Welcome to a brand new webinar from Nimble. This one will focus on introducing yourself to some really simple but important cybersecurity practices on how to protect yourself online. I've posted in the Q&A part. Please feel free to post questions and post questions throughout the webinar as well. We have designated some time at the end for Q&A, and I encourage everyone to ask questions. There are no silly or stupid questions. This is an opportunity for you to learn anything as well as get any sort of confusion out of the way to help you be more secure and better online. So let's go through a quick agenda of what we're going to cover today. We're going to have a look at the behavior of people, organizations, and corporations online and what we should and shouldn't expect them to do. And we'll have a look at some examples of that as well. So what you should and shouldn't expect when contacting government agencies, banks, and other companies online, as well as individuals. We're going to take a look at passwords and what the best practices for securing your passwords are. And what to avoid when setting up your passwords online. We're also going to have a look at some very interesting topics around what's known as phishing. Now, if you don't know what phishing is, that's A-OK. We're going to go through that, as well as quishing and smishing. Again, if you don't know what those topics are, that's fantastic. We're going to cover off on all of those today as well. We're also going to look at online login security. So what's the best practice around making sure that your online logins are secure and making sure that you are logging in as securely as you possibly can and making sure no one can take over your accounts without your knowledge. And then we're also going to have a look at smart devices and what that might mean for your home. So if you've got smart devices in your house, such as TVs and other appliances in your house, what the best practices are about that to make sure that your house is still secure. And as I mentioned, we've got time for Q&A at the end. So please don't hold on to your questions. Chuck them into the chat straight away because I'm conscious that we can forget about questions throughout the webinar. So please keep them coming through. All right, so let's have a look at behavior. What is considered typical behavior by organizations and individuals online? So we know that there are scams going around. I'm going to assume that most of you have received scams, text messages or scam emails around, it might be that you've got a road toll bill due or the ATO says that you owe them money or whatever it might be. So what can we consider is good behavior from an organization? What do we expect from them? So we'll jump in and have a look at a little bit of a quiz just to see how we were going. And this will hopefully get your minds thinking as well. So true or false, Microsoft is going to call you to tell you if your computer's been compromised. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to answer. Do you think Microsoft, a global organization, is going to call you personally and tell you that your computer has been compromised? False. So chances are Microsoft are not going to call you and tell you that. You might have an antivirus piece of software on your device that might do this for you, but Microsoft are not in the business of calling you to tell you that your computer is compromised. So if you ever get a call from Microsoft, or Microsoft in air quotations, to say that your computer's been compromised, chances are it's not them, and we need to actually question them. Right, next question. When purchasing items on seller marketplaces online, such as Gumtree or Facebook, we should never pay the money until we have the item in hand. True or false? If you're going to go and buy a second-hand item through Facebook or through Gumtree, when should we pay the money to the individual? So true, we shouldn't ever give away our money until we have the item in hand. There's a lot of scammers going around at the moment where they will jump online and say, I've got this really good deal. So they might be selling, for a complete example that's just popped into my mind, a brand new Dyson vacuum, which we know are generally hundreds of dollars. Then they might be selling one secondhand for $100 or $200. And they'll ask you for a deposit just to secure that item to make sure no one else gets it before you do. Chances are, and I had a friend who happened this last week, they're going to take your deposit and block you. So we don't ever exchange money until we see the item and have it in hand. And generally, we also want to try and do this by cash. We don't want to give out bank details or anything like that as well. So with those two questions in mind, how did you go? There'll be some more questions throughout the webinar as well, just to sort of test your knowledge and get you thinking. But how did you go? How do we think these organizations and individuals should behave online? There are some things that we really need to consider. How do we know the person who's at the other end of the phone, for example, or the other end of an email or the other end of a text message is who they say they are? If your internet service provider calls you and it's a private number or a mobile phone number or a landline number that we don't recognize, how do you actually know that that person is who they say they are? And if you don't know, and then they start asking you security questions, how do we know that it's not someone who's got malicious intent who wants to steal your personal information? We don't know. We also need to consider, is it too good to be true? If a prince from overseas is offering you thousands of dollars because they're a long lost descendant of your family, chances are it's too good to be true. And why would they be contacting you? And why would they be contacting you via email and not even using your first name? So we need to consider these things. These are red flags and things that we need to look out for. Behavior online that's also malicious is generally demanding. So we generally have people who are demanding and saying that you must pay this soon, or I need a deposit from you now to secure it, because then there is an urgency behind it and you're more likely to act without putting as much thought or judgment into your decisions. We should always, always, always verify who we're talking to or what we're talking about before we trust. And then once we have enough information to make an informed decision, then we should trust. It's not until then that we should exchange money or private information before we trust that individual. So fact for you, most organizations that hackers present themselves as are not going to contact you directly, like Microsoft, for example, that we saw earlier. Generally, these organizations have providers that will contact you if they need to, or they have resellers like, JB Hi-Fi or Harvey Norman or things like that that are going to contact you if your order is not going correctly or you have an overdue bill or things like that. Microsoft generally aren't going to contact you directly. And if they're going to contact you, it's going to be from a landline, a private number, not a mobile number. Things to consider when we get these calls is if they are calling you, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you saying to the person on the other end of the line, okay, I don't trust you right now, or I don't believe that you're from Microsoft or who you say you are, hanging up the phone and calling them back. This happened to me the other day. My internet service provider called me and straight out of the gate, they asked me for my full name and date of birth. And I just said, well, actually, no, your phone number hasn't come up correctly on my phone. So I'm going to hang up and call you back. And the person on the other end was totally understanding. They said, yep, that's fine, sir. Please call us back on this number, press this option, and let the person know that you are recalling back after a call from us. If the other person at the other end is starting to be, oh, no, sir, you don't need to do that, or no, you don't need to do this, I'm who I say I am, then we start to have some more red flags show up. So consider those things when those people call you, especially if it's organizations such as your bank or the ATO or MyGov or whomever these people are saying who they are, call them back. They will have procedures in place for that to happen. So now that we've talked about the behavior of organizations and individuals online, let's have a look at passwords. Passwords are these horrible things that we need to remember or try to remember anyway in order to get us into accounts online or access particular areas of a website or a service. But what are the best ways to secure our passwords, and what does a good password look like? So back to our true or false questionnaire. What do we think? Is having capital letters, numbers, and special characters in your password going to make it harder for a hacker to guess? Give you a few more seconds to have a think about that. Do we think that having capital letters, numbers, and special characters, so they're your exclamation marks, your hashtags, your dollar signs, your percentage signs, in your password, going to make it harder for an individual to guess? Surprisingly, the answer is actually false. We got really good as a society in creating passwords that are really difficult to remember by saying, okay, you must now have special characters at the end of it, or you must now have a number, or you must now have letters. But hackers know this. They know that passwords these days contain these characters. So they don't actually make it any more difficult for a hacker to guess. They have programs that cycle through known lists of passwords and randomly generated passwords to try and guess and crack into accounts. So the only thing that really makes it harder for an individual or a hacker to guess your password is the length of the password, not the complexity within it. So always go for a longer password over one of those passwords that looks like a jumbled up mess containing numbers, letters, capitals, and special characters. So let's have a look at some password facts and some best practices. So as a society, like I said, we've made it so difficult for us to remember our passwords. So if you've used a password generator recently, you would have noticed that it spits out a random assortment of numbers, letters, and characters, similar to the one that's on the screen now. But they're so easy for computers to guess. The computers just cycle through these passwords and these assortment of letters and numbers, and they can crack them quite easily. So what do we do instead? Well, the recommendations now that are coming out of organizations such as the Australian Cybersecurity Centre or the Australian Signals Directorate or the international standards authorities are saying, let's use passphrases instead. So a passphrase is when we combine 3 or 4 words that have no combination or meaning to each other. So we don't want to use our kids' names, for example, as the 3 words, or we don't want to use the suburbs that we've grown up in as the 3 words. We want to use words that are completely separate to each other. So for example, this one here that I've got, which is Lego photo lollipop, is a combination of things that were on my desk when I made this PowerPoint. So I had some Lego on my desk, I had some photos on my desk, and I had a lollipop on my desk as well. So I've combined them together to make a passphrase. And this is really easy for me to remember because I can make an acronym if I wanted to. I could go LPL. Oh, that was Lego photo lollipop. Or I can just remember Lego photo lollipop. A lot easier to remember than that password that we saw earlier that was a random assortment of numbers and letters. Now, because online organizations and websites and portals and things like that require us to have letters, lowercase letters, uppercase letters, and numbers and special characters, we kind of have to throw them into our passphrase instead as well. So you can see that I've replaced the O in Lego to a 0, and I've put a percentage sign at the end just to make it acceptable to some of these online portals. So passphrases, let's start using them instead. Like I said, remember that length is better over complexity. We also want to avoid using passwords and passphrases across multiple sites, because if one of those gets cracked and you're using the same email address across multiple sites, so if your same email address for your Netflix as it is for your PayPal, as it might be for your Facebook, if they crack into your Netflix account, for example, chances are they're going to be able to get into your Facebook and your other sites if you're using the same password multiple times. So if you ever get breached in any one of those accounts and you know you use that password elsewhere, it's really important that you go and change that password as soon as you possibly can. Okay, but you're probably sitting there going, but Shaun, how the hell do I remember all these passwords and passphrases considering I have like 40 online accounts? Well, we used to do this. I'm sure some of you might have had a phone book at home or a notebook at home that contained all your passwords. And in actual fact, it's pretty good practice because it's sitting behind the security of your home, right? Your locked doors. There's only certain people that know where it is. That's pretty good security. We now have a digital version of that, and that's known as a password manager. So this is an online sort of storage device that is encrypted, which means that nobody can get into that information without your master password. And then all you have to remember is that one master password. And once you unlock it with that one master password, you can get into all your other passwords. And you can copy and paste those passwords so you don't even need to remember them. And then most of these online password managers will also tell you if a password that you're using has been discovered online through the dark web or through other breaches that you might have used. So a password manager is very much like those old phone books or those old notebooks, even the ones you can still find today in places like Officeworks and the $2 shops and things like that. They still give you out password books. So this is the online digital version of that. There are plenty of free options. You don't necessarily need to pay a subscription to these platforms, Obviously, if you pay a subscription, you get some more benefits, but there are definitely some free ones out there. So there's not really an excuse for anyone to say, I can't afford one, or it's, it's not available to me. Yes, it might be a bit of a shift or a change in the way that you work, but it's really important that we have a look at a password manager to store some of those more complex passphrases that we might want to create. So now that we've talked about passwords and securing our accounts from a password perspective, let's have a look at how they might get compromised through a phishing attack. So for those of you who don't know, a phishing attack is a process where you might get a fraudulent email or a fraudulent message through Facebook or through LinkedIn or through other social media platforms that are pretending to be from a reputable company or a reputable organization, such as Microsoft or Netflix or PayPal or Apple or whomever it might be. And these emails generally want you to cough up a piece of information, such as a password or a username or both, or your credit card information or your credit card numbers. How do we keep an eye on these emails to make sure they're coming from who they say they are, but also how do we make sure we don't cough up information to the wrong people? So we're going to have a look at that in a second. But first, let's have a look at some true or false questions. So let's go through this email, which looks like it's come from Microsoft 365. Do we think this is a phishing email? True, it is a phishing email. And there's a couple of ways that we can have a look at this and identify that it's a phishing email. First, we can see that there's no name. It's not saying dear Shaun or dear whomever you might be or hello or anything like that. It's just gone straight into a demanding tone like we talked about earlier. We can also have a look at the email address up next to Microsoft, and we can see that it says Microsoft@emailrecords.com. Microsoft are not going to send you an email that has @emailrecords.com. They're going to send you an email that says @microsoft.com, if they're going to send you an email at all. We can also see that there is no formal sign off. We've got thank you, the Office 365 team, but there's no sign off from a person. It looks like this thing has been automatically generated, and we've got some very sketchy information throughout the email. Also, it claims to provide a limited length of information, and really it's asking you to click on that link that says view alert details. So let's have a look at this one. True or false? This is a phishing email from Netflix. This one's actually a little bit harder. It could either be true or false, but I've set the answer in the PowerPoint as false. We actually don't have enough information here. So we can see definitely that we want to be skeptical because, again, we've got a generic greeting, hello, but we don't have enough information. If you haven't canceled your Netflix membership, chances are it's probably a phishing email. So we need to consider the context of which we're getting this email as well. We can see that there are some links there from the restart your membership buttons as well as contact us. So we definitely don't want to be clicking on those links if we're not expecting this email. However, it could be a valid email. If you've canceled your Netflix subscription, you could get an email from them saying, we're sorry to see you go. That's generally good practice or best practice in that organization to follow up with the client to say, okay, well, you're leaving us, but we'd like some feedback from you as to why or whatever it might be. All right, last one. This is a phishing email from Microsoft. Answer is true. So this one's a little bit more difficult because I didn't put in who it came from. But again, we have hello user, security is our top priority. We can't rely on the poor spelling and grammar like we used to anymore. They have tools like ChatGPT and other sort of AI that can help them get, I suppose, a grammatically correct and spell checked email that gets sent to you. But we're going to go through what phishing is in a second, but we don't ever really want to scan QR codes that we don't trust or have a reputable sort of background or identity for. So this email looks like it's coming from Microsoft, but is Microsoft really going to contact you to say that your authenticator has needs to be updated? No, they're not. Your organization is going to contact you. Whoever's managing your Office 365 subscription, if you have one, is going to contact you to say that they need an update. So for example, if you're using Nimble as your managed service provider, we are going to contact you to say that your authenticator needs an update, not Microsoft. All right, so let's have a look at some scams that are going around. So we've got some scams on the right-hand side here that we can see. Apparently, now I live in WA and we don't have tolls here in WA. Apparently, I have a significant amount of money owing to the government for a toll booth that I went through without paying. And I'm sure many of you have gotten that text message as well. Chances are it's not the case. If the ATO texts you to say that you have a tax bill, they're not going to text you. They're going to send you a letter in the mail. So don't necessarily believe these things from the get-go. Do some more research. Contact the ATO if you need to, if you're unsure. But make sure you contact them directly through reputable numbers that we know about. You'll notice that when MyGov sends you an email, they never include a link. MyGov never includes a link in their email. It's only ever you need to log into your MyGov account by going to this address and logging in directly. So we always want to avoid clicking on links directly. We want to navigate to those websites on our own, or whatever login page it's sort of claiming to send us to. Let's go there ourselves by just typing it into our search engine or into our web address bar. On the right-hand side, we can also see another scam that's going around called the Hi Mum scam. This is when someone will send you a text message claiming to be your child, saying, "Hi Mum," or "Hi Dad, I've got a new number. This is my new number. Can you save it?" And straight out of the gate, they're trying to develop a reputable relationship with you. And then a week or so later, after they've texted you a couple of times claiming to be your child, they're going to say, "Oh my God, I'm at the shops and my bank card just declined. Can you send $100 to this new bank account that I've got?" And it obviously is working. They racked up millions of dollars last year with this scam. So it's working. So watch out for those scams and always try to verify first before we trust implicitly. So as I mentioned earlier, QR codes, we don't want to scan them without knowing where they're from, specifically in public locations where they can be tampered with. A lot of restaurants now, after the pandemic, have decided that they're going to use QR codes as the best way of sort of ordering from your table. This is great and innovative, and it's much easier for us to do that because we can then stay at the table, continue chatting with our friends or family, and order while we're doing that. And we can order when we want to rather than waiting for someone else to come over and, say, "Are you ready for your order to be taken?" But there was an example of this in the US where a chain of restaurants had their QR codes on their tables tampered with, and the new QR code that the hackers had put there took them to a website that looked exactly like the menu. And once they had submitted their order and put in their credit card information, they sat there and wondered where their food was, but then saw that there were multiple charges being put against their credit card. So we just want to be 100% sure first before we scan QR codes. All right, let's take a look at online security before we jump into our Q&A. So let's talk about something called multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is where we try and verify who you are 2 or more times. And we can do this in a number of ways, and which we'll go through in a moment. But first, true or false question. Is having a passcode and a password on your phone to unlock it an example of two-factor or multi-factor authentication? True or false? The answer is false. So having the option to unlock your phone with a passcode or a password is not an example of multi-factor authentication. Okay, that is just 2 different forms of authentication we can use to get into our phone. So when we talk about multi-factor authentication, we talk about trying to verify you in 2 of 3 ways, or possibly in 3 of 3 ways, depending on how secure it is. So we talk about something you know. So there's something that you know that you need to be able to provide to the system to get into it. So it's a passcode or a password or something that you might know. So also the answers to your security questions. Remember those questions that we all had to answer when we first started going online, like what street did you grow up on? What's the maiden name of your mother? Whatever it might be. That's something that you know. This is becoming harder and harder for us to keep those things secret, especially with more and more data breaches online, spilling out passwords, and also people posting, things online through Facebook and through other social media platforms about where they grew up. It's very hard for us to keep that information safe and secure now. Then we have something that you have. So that is like your mobile phone. So that's something that you have. So when you're asked to enter a text message code on the website portal that comes to your phone, that's an example of verifying that you have something that you should have to be who you are. Or finally, something you are. So that's biometrics. So we all have, if you've got some of the newer phones from Apple or Samsung or other Android suppliers, you'll have biometrics such as fingerprint or retina scan. That's an example of something that you are. So multi-factor authentication is the idea that we combine two of these things together to make it more secure, to make sure that you are who you say you are when you're logging into something. And we want to make sure that we do that because it makes it harder for hackers to get into our accounts. So as a security tip, I recommend that all of you go away from this webinar and try to turn on multi-factor authentication on as many of your accounts online as you possibly can. Now, I know that this will add a layer of complexity to the way that you log in, but 9 times out of 10, most of these sites will say, okay, you've turned on multi-factor authentication on your Facebook account, for example. It looks like you log in from this device multiple times. Do you want to trust this device? So you might do that for your phone or for your laptop at home or your desktop at home, whatever it might be. But then that way you don't have to multi-factor authentication again. I have a really good example of this. A friend of mine last week had their Facebook account hacked. The hacker got in, changed the email address to a different email, and then changed the password and got out very quickly. If that person had multi-factor authentication turned on, they would have got a prompt straight to their phone saying, hey, it looks like someone's trying to log into your Facebook account from a new location that you've never logged in before. Do you want to approve it or do you want to decline it? And it would have stopped the hacker dead in their tracks right there. So I encourage you, there are a lot of sites online that automatically you must have multi-factor authentication turned on, such as your MyGov or your banking and things like that. But I encourage you to jump onto your social media accounts and do it as well. And finally, let's take a quick look at smart devices. True or false? I connected my dishwasher because it has Wi-Fi capabilities to my Wi-Fi, and hackers can't hack it because it's not a computer. The answer is false. Hackers can absolutely hack your dishwasher, and it's absolutely more likely to happen because these devices are hardly ever updated. So things like dishwashers, microwaves, ovens, washing machines, those appliances that we use that apparently now need internet connection because they want to tell us on our phone that our dishes are now clean, they don't need it. They don't need it. Just because it has Wi-Fi doesn't mean you should connect it. These things are outdated and they never get updated. So when there's a vulnerability in them or something that a hacker can use to compromise your home network, they will, and they won't get updated. Things like smart TVs are a little bit different. They are generally much better at being updated by the manufacturer or the person who's made them. So they're not too bad. And also we want our Netflix and our Stan to work, so we need to connect them to the internet. But just be vigilant. Make sure you're keeping those TVs up to date as well. So as a tip, avoid connecting devices to your network unless you absolutely need them to be on there. And so that's it. Hopefully, I really hope that you learned something from this webinar, a short, sharp, and sweet one. If you have any questions, like I said, I encourage you to chuck them into the Q&A or the chat. And yeah, I'll be around for the next 5 or so minutes if anyone's got any questions. And remember to always question and never trust. So any suggestions on what password manager is best? Do your research online as to what password manager will suit you best. Nimble has it utilizes Keeper as its password manager, as well as MyGlue. So these are 2 really good password managers that have both a business model as well as a personal model. Personally, I use Bitwarden. They have a free version as well, so that's a really good example of a free one. So there are plenty out there. Just do your research, especially to the ones that have been around for a while. Some of them have experienced some data breaches, so make sure you take that into account too. Yep. So, question around passwords being for sale on the dark web. There's absolutely a way to check these if you want to check if you've been sort of breached and if they're online. There's a lovely website called Have I Been Pwned? So PWNED. So if you just chuck that into your web engine, your search engine, so Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, whatever web engine you're using, Have I Been Pwned? You can type in your email address or your username, and it will give you a list of any passwords that might then be available for sale on the black web or that were included in a data breach. Generally, you can also see these passwords, or you can get a report of what these passwords might be, so you can know never to use them again on any other sites as well. Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I am available on LinkedIn or through email as well. So if you have any other questions or need any advice or anything like that, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to have a chat. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.